This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus episode 680. This week, we welcome Dr. Allison Bales of Energy Vanguard. We're going to talk about his new book called A House Needs to Breathe, or Does It? We will talk about his thoughts on proper ways to make homes comfortable, healthy, and energy efficient. Dr. Bales is widely known for his excellent writing in the Energy Vanguard blog. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They're the reason we can continue doing the show. Our marquee sponsor is First On Site at firstonsite.com. Our association sponsors are the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, ACGIH.org, the American Industrial Hygiene Association, AIHA.org, the Cleaning Industry Research Institute, CIRI Science.org, the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC.org. Industry sponsors are AEML Laboratories, AEMLINC.com, Particles Plus, ParticlesPlus.com, TSI Inc., TSI.com, Sunbelt Rentals, SunbeltRentals.com, April Air, April, AIRE.com, Healthy Indoors Magazine, HealthyIndoors.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to report that Doug Conan with Aerotech Environmental in Dayton, Ohio, was first to identify 13 billion as within the range of the estimated number of connected IoT or Internet of Things devices in existence today. The IQ Radio Trivia question for today, November 4th, 2022, has been sponsored by TSI Inc., an industry leader in precision instrumentation for the monitoring of indoor air. Learn how to expand your IAQ investigations at TSI.com. Here's today's IAQ Radio Trivia question. Name the Ohio State grad student whose accidental discovery was the breakthrough in creating our most popular insulating material. Back to you, Joe.
Well, it's hard to believe, but it's been almost 10 years since we've had Dr. Allison Bales on the show. Time flies when you're having fun. Great to have you back.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's good to be back.
You know, we talked back then about something we're going to talk more about today. Is energy efficiency compatible with good indoor air quality? And I noticed in going through the table of contents for your book here that you really focus pretty heavily on indoor environmental quality. And, I was happy to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where you need to start with any of this stuff. And you can't focus just on energy efficiency. You have to focus on the big picture, what it is that people need from a house. And that's why the first section of the book is called Start at the End, where I talk about indoor environmental quality and all that good stuff. One thing I like to tell people is that a lot of people get into this stuff through energy efficiency, but energy efficiency is the gateway drug to building science and indoor environmental quality and the big picture thinking.
I like that. It's the gateway drug. So who is this book written for?
Good question. So it's not a book for absolute beginners, although absolute beginners will get something out of it. Their eyes will glaze over in places, but there's certainly a lot of good stuff in there for people who know almost nothing about it. And it's not an engineering textbook, although a lot of engineers have ordered the book, and I hope we'll find it helpful. It's a book for people who are fairly early on the building science learning curve. They may be an HVAC technician or an installation contractor, a builder, a homeowner who's having a house built or improving a house. They could be a real estate agent, appraiser, a lot of different backgrounds of people coming into this will benefit from it, because as I say in the subtitle there, it's an introduction to building science, not an absolute 101 introduction, more like a 201 introduction. A lot of people can get something out of it.
Well, and I haven't had a chance to read the book yet. I'll be clear up front about that. In fact, we're going to make sure I get a copy. I want to get one for my son, because I think he does construction here, and I think a guy like him, this is perfect for. He's got a little background. He's been hanging out with me for a little while. He understands building science a little bit, but I think this will help kind of tie it all together, at least from the way I noticed it was written, and the chapters and the way they're aligned. You have both parts and chapters, and the three big parts are start at the end, the building enclosure, and the mechanical system. I like how you keep that real simple, and then within each of those parts you go into more detail. So first of all, what made you divide it into three parts like that?
Oh gosh. One of the hardest parts about doing this was organizing the whole thing, trying to figure out what material needs to be in there, and then where does the material go? How am I going to organize this? And the parts I think are really were the easiest, because starting at the end is natural. And Robert Bean is a huge proponent of this, has had a big influence on my thinking in this area. He's got this saying that he uses all the time: design for people and good buildings will follow. And that's kind of where I started with. And then another thing that early on really impacted my thinking is that you can think of from the building science perspective, you can think of a house as made of two things: the building enclosure and the mechanical systems. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, of course, but from building science, that's a good way to divide things up. And I think on a Saturday morning home improvement show a long time ago, I heard somebody say, the building enclosure is the bathtub, and the heating and cooling system, or the HVAC systems, are the faucet. So that's where that came from. And then the chapters kind of fell out of that, but then deciding what goes in what chapter and how many chapters I have, and that evolved over time as I started writing it.
I think what really caught my attention quickly was in chapter 1. What's the purpose of a house? You immediately go into Stuart Brand's shearing layers of change. Yeah. And I don't think our audience will be completely familiar with that. So I've asked John to put a graphic together for that. And I'd like you to kind of talk about the shearing layers of change and why it appears to me they made a big impression on you.
Yeah. So it comes from Stuart Brand's books. And Stuart Brand, in case you're not familiar with the name, is a really smart guy who's he's had an incredible, amazing career. He's been on the forefront of all kinds of stuff. In the 60s, he was the guy who spearheaded the Whole Earth catalog, and then the later versions of that came out. And he's been involved with computers. In the 80s, he started a computer network, or was involved in the starting of it, called The Well, if you remember that. And he's done a lot of really good stuff. In the early 90s, he published a book called How Buildings Learn. And this graphic is directly from his book. And I've got a version of it in my book that we adapted. Yeah, it's a wonderful book. And he talks about how buildings evolve over time. The ones that don't get torn down, of course, we don't see now the ones that were torn down along the way, and especially the ones that didn't last very long at all. Those aren't around, but the ones that do last go through lots of changes in their lifetimes. And he's got a great quote early in the book. He says that the fundamental problem of buildings is that they're constantly trying to tear themselves apart. and part of the reason for this is these what he calls the shearing layers of change. And you can see them there. Starting with the site, you've got the skin going from outside to inside, the structure, the services, the space plan, and the stuff. the 6 S's, and the these different layers change at different rates, and so the density of the lines and the number of arrowheads gives you an idea of the quickness of how a layer changes. So you can see, of course, the stuff on the inside changes the fastest, and then the space plan changes next fastest, and the structure and the site are the slowest changing parts of a house. So it's an important way of thinking about houses, and it does impact building science as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think looking back at my own background in dealing with buildings, and even now with my son doing construction work, he's commonly dealing with one of those layers. And when you address it in that manner, I think people better understand it. And I think that's probably why you kind of set up the beginning of the book with that, the shearing layers of change. And then you go into immediately indoor environmental quality, which I thought, wow, a book on, construction and building and houses immediately goes into indoor environmental quality. I thought this is fantastic. So you're starting at the end with making sure you have good indoor environmental quality. Then you go into integrating sustainability with indoor environmental quality and saving energy. So those are key components in the purpose of the house. What kind of set your thinking in that way?
I guess everything that's happened to me my whole life.
Yeah.
As I said, Robert Bean's philosophy of designing for people, and then when you do that, you end up with a good building. And Joe Stiebrick says the same kind of thing. I mean, when you design a good building that controls the flows of heat, air, and moisture, and don't focus on just energy efficiency, you get the energy efficiency, but you also get these other benefits. You get comfort, you get indoor air quality, you get durability, and so it all goes together. You can't think of these things separately.
You're very involved with the energy efficiency world. I don't even know what they call themselves anymore, Allison. If you could let me know, because that group has really expanded quite a bit into indoor environmental quality. And in your early days, you built your own home. You worked at several other, very high performance type building companies. And I'm wondering, from your own experience, what kind of, did you have like a project where things kind of, you thought were going to go a certain way, but they didn't because maybe you hadn't considered things like indoor environmental quality?
Well, I mean, the house that I built is a good example. So 21 years ago, I built a house, and it was an amazing project. It launched me into my new career. I had been teaching physics. I was teaching physics at the time. And I got into it. I had never built anything bigger than a bookcase, and I took on this project and learned a whole lot along the way. Didn't know much building science at the time, didn't know mechanical design. And so learned a lot on the way. One thing I learned is that doing things in the right order in construction turns out to be really, really important, because if you do them in the wrong order, they become impossible or very expensive to fix later. Not impossible. I mean, you can always tear down and start over, but they become more and more expensive as you do them out of the right order. And I lived in the house 3 years, and it was wonderful, and the most comfortable house I've ever lived in. Probably the biggest regret I had was that I didn't know much about mechanical systems and mechanical design at the time. I knew that I needed a load calculation, and so I hired a contractor who did a manual J, and his manual J came out to about 1,000 square feet per ton, which is twice as much as the typical rule of thumb used by contractors. So that was good, but it was still twice the size of the system that I needed for the house. When I did a real manual J load calculation myself later, well, I mean, he did a real one, but contractors are afraid to undersize things, so they will add load here and there, and when you do it correctly, you still end up with a little bit oversized system. But I found that I needed half the size of the system that I had put in. I had 3 tons. I really needed only 1.5.
You know, that kind of leads to something. I was going to do this in a lightning round later, but I think this is a good time. In the first show we did with you, we talked about HVAC equipment, and during that show, your key point was that improvements in HVAC equipment are lagging behind other building materials and products. Is that still true today?
You know, last December, I wrote an article that says, I think the title of the article was something like, "Building enclosures have improved more than mechanical systems." So yes, it's still true. And I wrote that article because I had visited a new construction house built by a production builder near where I live, and you know, they have gotten really good at the air barrier. Some of the moisture control, the water control layer stuff is, you know, still lacking, but you know, they've gotten really good at the air barrier because of one simple thing. In Georgia now, we have had required blower door testing for over a decade now. And, you know, yes, you can lie, you can cheat on your reports, but if you get a real blower door test, you know, the number that you get doesn't lie if it's done correctly. So the building enclosures, the air barriers have improved tremendously, I think. And the mechanical systems, there's still a whole lot wrong there.
Well, later in the book, you talk about, you know, creating a healthy home and the keys to indoor air quality, and you go over air tightness, moisture control, source control, filtration, mechanical ventilation. I noticed there you said that air tightness, the contractors have gotten much better, but with respect to moisture control, I get the impression you don't feel like we've come along as far on that as we have on air tightness. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just because there's an easy test for air tightness. We do a blower door test and we get a number, and we have a threshold that we're trying to hit. And, you know, as the codes have changed, that threshold has gotten better. So we have to hit a lower and lower number for air leakage. So I think that's the main reason. There's not a simple test you can do for moisture control or for mechanical systems the way there is for air tightness.
You know, with the advent of the use of more mini split heat pump, would you consider that an improvement over the years? I mean, there are more of them available now. They seem to be very efficient. You can have them either ducted or non-ducted. That seems like a bit of an improvement in the mechanical side of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that the mechanical side hasn't improved at all. There's definitely improvement there, and you know, there is a test that they have to do there as well. In addition to the testing the building enclosure for air tightness, they have to test the ducts for air tightness as well, or get them inside the enclosure so that all the leakage would be inside. And yeah, I mean, I love variable capacity mini split equipment. I have it in my house. We have it in our office. When we do residential HVAC design, most of the jobs that we do, that's what we're specifying. And it's really, really good because, I mean, number one, the heating load on a house in the winter, the cooling load on a house in summer isn't just one number. It's changing all the time. You know, at nighttime it's really cold in winter, and so that's when you get your peak heating load. And as the sun comes out the next day, or even if the sun doesn't come out, it's usually, you know, warmer in the day in the winter, and in the summertime, likewise, we have temperature changes throughout the day that change the load on the house. But if you have fixed capacity equipment, your equipment can't respond to that. It's just all on or all off. And the only way it responds is by the amount of time that it runs. With the variable capacity equipment, you can get much longer run times, and that evens out the airflow and the heating and cooling distribution, which leads to better comfort.
So the one complaint I get from the indoor environmental quality people about the mini splits is the difficulty in cleaning them, and that people don't realize you have to maintain and clean them. Do you hear that at all? Or is there something that you can tell our listeners with respect to maybe there's better guidance on how to clean them coming out?
Yes, and so that just clues me into another thing. So when you're saying mini split there, it sounds to me like in your mind you are thinking of a ductless unit, usually a ductless wall-mounted unit.
Correct.
And yes, those are difficult to clean. They have little filters, which aren't great, and you have to keep them clean, and that's really important. And they can get nasty inside them, and they microbial growth. So that they have to be kept clean. Some of the ones are difficult to clean, but mini splits are more than just ductless units. In my house, I have mini splits, and I have got two outdoor units and 3 indoor units. 2 of the 3 indoor units are ducted units, and they're a different shape and size than the standard air handlers, but they're, in terms of difficulty of cleaning the coils and stuff, they're about the same. And that's also not easy, because you've got to get inside the air handler to do that, and that's it's always trouble to get in there.
You mentioned another very important component to any mechanical system, and that is the filtration. And I noticed you got a section in the book on filtration. Are we getting any new improvements on filtration for these mini splits?
With the ductless units, not so much that I've seen, but with ducted units, I've got low static, which means there's not a lot of fan power air handlers, and I'm running the air through MERV 13 filters, and I've got very, very, very low pressure drop. So the maximum rated pressure is supposed to be 0.2 inches of water column, and mine are running at 0.14 with MERV 13 filtration. So nice. Very low pressure. We can do very low pressure drop across high efficiency MERV 13 filters, but it requires sizing them properly. And our rule of thumb, which I think I learned this from John Simmelhack, who's a really smart guy in Virginia, does a lot of really great work, is 2 square feet of filter area, and that's just length times width, not the whole pleated thing pulled apart and stretched out, but length times width of the filter itself. 2 square feet of that for each 400 cubic feet per minute of airflow, and that'll get you a low pressure drop. Interesting.
And with respect to the ducted mini splits, what kind of cost are we looking at there versus, the typical mini split that's non-ducted, you're looking at maybe $2,500, $3,000, $3,500 installed even. What are we looking at for I've never put in a ducted version. How much are those?
Well, talking about pricing of equipment these days is difficult. We just got an email from one of our clients who, and I don't know how many systems he was having put in, but it was like double what he was expecting. And it was, now the whole quote was, I think he said it was like $35,000 or $40,000. That was for all the equipment and the installation and the ductwork and everything. But that's, and I don't know what size his house was. The systems that I had put in my house, well, I got them through scratch and dent, and they were inexpensive that way. But 3 years ago when I got them, before all the inflation and supply chain issues we've had now, they would have been maybe $3,000 for the 1 outdoor unit and 2 indoor ducted air handlers.
It's not too bad.
Yeah. Now that I'm not, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 of equipment from a contractor.
Well, going back to the outline from the book here, you start at the end Then you go over the purpose of a house, IEQ, integrating sustainability with IEQ, then saving energy. Let's talk a little bit more about integrating sustainability with IEQ. You hear a lot about sustainability, but I've rarely seen people try to integrate sustainability and IEQ, at least not in a book that I've read recently here. Tell us a little more of your thoughts on that topic.
Gosh, what did I write in that part? Well, I'm going to guess what I said is that, IEQ has to come before energy efficiency and things like that. So we've got to focus on what the people need. But we also have to take the big picture view, and we want that, sustainability as well. So energy efficiency is a big part of that. And I think chapter 4, I believe, chapter 4 is all about energy use in the home. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about decarbonization and climate change and stuff in there. So because we've got to focus on the people first. I mean, we need to make sure that the people are going to be happy and healthy, and they can sleep at night, because they knew enough not to bolt that outdoor unit for their mini split heat pump right outside the bedroom wall, which creates resonance and keeps them on edge all night.
Well, you hit one that really comes home to me. Yep. I put it right on the bedroom wall out there. I got to fix that.
Yeah. So you're getting the vibrations and the noise transmission. It doesn't happen every time, but there are vibration isolators that can help with that. So you may be able to keep it there. But yeah, whenever you bolt an outdoor unit onto the wall of a wood frame structure, you may have some noise and vibration issues.
Absolutely. I have a log home, and even with those 8-inch log yellow pine, it's boom. Cliff, you got a text question?
Yeah, we do. The text question really dealt with EMFs and the fact that everyone just seems to be really excited about sensors, and they're concerned about health issues and so on and so forth. And with all these Wi-Fi devices, are they, are we overlooking a potential problem that we're going to realize down the road?
Great question.
Well, that's a good question, and that's an issue I don't know much about. I've read that and heard about people who are sensitive to electromagnetic fields, and I just don't know about that one. But we've had electrified homes for a century now, and we've had very complex electronic circuitry in our homes for half a century. So most people seem, the great majority of people seem not to have a problem with that. For people who do, I just don't know anything about that.
It's interesting that we're hearing more about indoor environmental quality with respect to homes and people's concerns about indoor environmental quality. And I noticed, like I said, right away that you put that right up at the top of one of your concerns, but you don't hear much about electromagnetic fields and things of that nature, at least with respect to indoor environments. Not as much as I thought you would hear. And maybe it's because, like you said, there hasn't been an explosion of people showing issues.
It just occurred to me that Better Call Saul touches on that issue.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely.
Because Saul's brother was sensitive to that in the show. And at the end, I wasn't. Gosh, it's been a while since I've seen that episode now, but it seemed like they made it out to be a fake issue because Saul planted some electronic device in the room and his brother didn't respond to it the way he expected. I don't remember. Anyway, that issue hasn't made it into a popular show.
And I think it will be coming up more and more as we see these buildings and homes they're going to have more sensors. Those sensors are going to be connecting to other things, and it's something to keep an eye on. It's one thing that we've been trying to keep an eye on here. Let's talk a little bit about getting comfortable. You mentioned Robert Bean, and I agree. He's one of the guys that has really influenced a lot of people when it comes to comfort in indoor environments. And you have a chapter on getting comfortable. One of the things is naked people need building science. I'm just curious what you wrote about in there.
Yeah, so I wrote an article, in 2011 called "Naked People Need Building Science," and so I start off that chapter with that article, and it's about how important radiant energy is, because a lot of people think, oh, all we need is the right temperature and maybe the right humidity if we're in the Southeast and talking about cooling, but there's this huge focus just on air temperature. But comfort is a lot more than just the air temperature, and it's a lot more than just air temperature and humidity. There's also the radiation that happens. I mean, our bodies are heat engines. We have this metabolism going on, and we're constantly giving off heat. Even in wintertime, we are giving off heat. We need constant cooling. In wintertime, it's just we don't want to cool off too quickly. So if you take off all your clothes and walk around inside your house and you've got no insulation in the walls and single pane windows, you're not going to be comfortable because you're radiating a lot of heat away, and those walls and windows are just sucking it up, and they're not radiating much back to you. So that two-way transfer of radiant heat is really important, and it's a more important factor than the air temperature. You can be naked inside a house with uninsulated building enclosure and bad windows and be uncomfortable on a cold day. Even if the temperature inside is 75 or 80 degrees, you might still be uncomfortable because of that radiant heat transfer. So that's what that's all about.
I can attest to that one in my home here. I live on a slab in a pretty cold climate up in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and if you don't get heat down close to that slab, I don't care what the temperature of the air is, you're going to be cold. Number one, you got to wear a pair of slippers because that helps to separate you a little bit from that slab. Number two, I find, and I know people don't like carpet, but frankly, in some areas of my home, we use carpet because it's much more comfortable in the winter. And I don't think people think about those things sometimes when they're dealing with building, new construction or remodeling existing buildings.
Yeah. Speaking of carpet and rugs on the floor, Robin Pender is a building physicist in England, and she recently posted something online about, and she does a lot of historical stuff with historical buildings. And she posted something about some research on how people kept warm a long time ago in these old stone buildings, castles and things. And the way they did it was tapestries. In the wintertime, they had all these hooks around the castle, and they'd hang the tapestries in wintertime to cover those walls, and that blocks the radiant path. The tapestries were a radiant barrier. They blocked that radiant path, and the tapestry, even though it may be closer to the same temperature of the wall than to you, it's not going to radiate. I mean, it's not going to suck up as much heat out of you as the stone wall would. So, rugs on the floor can make a big difference. A carpet can make a big difference in that case.
Yeah, we do the same thing here. I've got a log home, and it's, there's no insulation in the log walls, and you put up some tapestries or, other things. You got to watch behind them, make sure they don't get moldy. You got to wash them, just like carpet. When you have carpet, you've got to make sure I use a HEPA vacuum. You get it cleaned on a regular basis. You take good care of it. But, we have to make trade-offs with respect to, comfort and indoor environmental quality. Hey, let's stop here, go to halftime, thank our sponsors. We'll be right back with the second half of Dr. Allison Bales. Our marquee sponsor is First On Site, your trusted full-service disaster recovery and property restoration company at firstonsite.com. Our association sponsors are ACGIH, Advancing Careers of Professionals in Environmental Health, Industrial Hygiene, and Safety, interested in defining their science. ACGIH.org. AIHA, Healthy Workplaces, A Healthier World. AIHA.org. The Cleaning Industry Research Institute. See more deeply through science and research. CIRI science.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, IICRC.org. Industry sponsors are AEML Laboratories, free shipping, great pricing, same-day results with no rush fee, AEMLinc.com. Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us. ParticlesPlus.com. TSI Inc., an industry leader in precision instrumentation for monitoring indoor air. Learn how to expand your IAQ investigations. TSI.com. Sunbelt Rentals, availability, reliability, and ease for all your IAQ and restoration needs at sunbeltrentals.com. April Air, healthy home, April, AIRE.com. And Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online magazine for industry professionals and consumers, healthyindoors.com. All right, we're back. We've got Dr. Bales. We're talking about his new book here, and A Home Needs to Breathe, or Does It? We covered part one pretty well. Part two is the building enclosure. Part three is mechanical systems. I kind of like to jump into part two, the building enclosure, for a moment. I want to start with the title. A house needs to breathe, or does it? I know what I think the answer is, Allison. Tell us your answer.
My answer is no. The house doesn't need to breathe. And I've been throwing a lot of quotes at you. I've got another one. This is a really good one. James Peters, somebody that I know in New Zealand, has likes to say, if you find yourself inside something that's breathing, get out. You've been eaten. You have been eaten. So the reason I chose this title is because, I've had a lot of, it seems like it's mostly builders, but it's not always builders say, oh, a house needs to breathe. We shouldn't make them so airtight. And they blame all kinds of problems on, houses that are too tight. So if they're saying that for indoor air quality, one of the big problems with that is, okay, so we're going to leave a bunch of random leaks in the building enclosure to let air just leak in from wherever it can. So, those holes between the house and the garage are going to let that nice air from the garage come in with all the exhaust fumes and the pesticides and whatever else is out there. Or from the moldy crawl space under the house, or the dirty attic where that air is being sucked through the dead squirrel on top of the top plate. So that's not good air. So that's one reason I don't like the word breathe here. Another reason is people use that word in two different ways in relation to houses. Number one, they use it, like I just said, the house should be leaky. It needs to breathe. It needs to have lots of air movement through the enclosure. And number two, they use it for drying. A house needs to breathe, and in other words, it needs to be able to dry out. Well, I do agree, houses need to be able to dry out. But the word breathe is very confusing there. So let's just drop the word breathe and talk about drying and air tightness.
We find the same problem with our customers. They will say, well, no, doesn't a house need to breathe? And I agree that it doesn't need to breathe, but maybe I guess I would say it needs to breathe, but it needs to breathe the right way. You need to have the right pathway coming in. You're going to need ventilation of some kind typically. And as long as that's properly planned and designed, I think it'll work just fine. The other thing I noticed in this chapter is you go over the control layers, okay? And you talk about integrating control layers with shearing layers. I wonder if you could talk about that for a moment. We've seen a couple different ways of defining the control layers. How do you define them?
The control layers are the parts of the building enclosure that control the flow of heat, the flow of air, and the flow of moisture. And moisture comes in two forms, liquid and vapor. So we need control layers to control these things. We want an air barrier that reduces the air leakage to as close to zero as we can get, or as is reasonable. We want thermal control layer that reduces the heat flow to as close to zero as we can get. We want liquid water control layer that reduces the chance of liquid water getting into the building cavities and the assemblies as much as possible. And vapor control is more complex. Some houses need a vapor control layer, some houses don't. Some assemblies need them, some don't. It depends on where you are. Vapor control is more important in one-way climates where all you're doing is heating or all you're doing is cooling. In northern Canada, in a really cold climate where you never use an air conditioner, you will need some vapor control, because diffusion of water vapor through materials then becomes important. Most of the water vapor problems, though, are solved with an air barrier, because water vapor getting into a wall cavity, for example, and condensing on the backside of cold sheathing, most of that water vapor that gets in there is from air leakage, not through diffusion. When it is possible to get diffusion in really cold climates, and then we need some vapor control. So, and it's actually, I should back up. It's not just really cold climates. It's also, I mean, even in, climate zone 5, you need vapor control. So vapor control is more complex. In the more temperate climates, vapor control is less important. So let's see. And the question was about integrating.
Well, then you were integrating that with let's see. You were integrating that with the shearing layers, right? How do you?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting concept. But put the shearing layers up again, John, if you would.
Yeah. If I can share my screen, I can show you.
Please do. Yeah, let's do that.
This is a diagram from the book. Yeah. So here's this is basically Stuart Brand's version of it. This is our adaptation of the same basic thing, and then I have another diagram at the beginning of chapter 11 where I added another layer. Unfortunately, it doesn't start with S. He's got all these S's, and I threw a C in there, or a CL, but oh well.
I see. You have the control layer in there. Okay.
Yeah. So, the one of the big problems, and this is especially true with insulation, the thermal control layer. The insulation we throw in the cavities, it's intermingled with the structure. It's in the stud cavities and the joist cavities and rafter cavities. So we have these interruptions of we have framing and insulation, and if you don't have continuous insulation anywhere, then you've got thermal bridges, which can lead to all kinds of problems, not just heat loss. And the ideal place to put all your control layers would be outside the structure. This is, Joe Stiebrick has made it. He's popularized the perfect wall a lot, and the perfect enclosure would be where you do the same thing with the ceilings and floors. You put all the control layers on the outside, your water control layer, vapor control layer, thermal and air control layers, put them all on the outside of the structure. That number one means that you can make them continuous if you do a really good job and pay attention.
But it is easier to do it
easier
from there than it is from inside. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also can be less expensive and easier when you're dealing with renovations down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it can be. And it depends on, what kind of renovation you have and what kind of house you have. If you've got brick cladding on the outside and all your control layers are between the structure and the cladding, getting to them is more difficult.
Yes.
But when you have all the control layers on the outside of the structure, you're protecting the structure from the thermal cycling and the moisture cycling. If you put your control layers inside or intermingle it with the structure, then in US and Canada, we build with lightweight wood framing, and wood absorbs moisture, it can transfer heat. So if you have all your control layers on the outside, you are protecting that structure from all that cycling of moisture and heat.
I've got a text here that kind of, I'm not sure. Well, I'll just read it to you. You wrote in an article, 10 consequences of keeping your home really cold in the summer. And they are seeing more folks who don't believe those physics apply to them. Are we seeing a de-evolution in comfort physiology that requires this, or is this just some spoiled humans?
I think it has more to do with spoiled humans. I think a lot of people think they need those low temperatures just because that's what they're used to, but I don't know. Don't ask me to name what the 10 consequences were right now. I probably couldn't list them all, but it's a problem. We've been called in to look at houses in humid climates, like coastal humid climates, really hot, really humid, where they like to keep the house at 68 degrees at night, and they're right on the water, and the dew point is 80 degrees. So when you have an outdoor mass of air with a dew point of 80 degrees and you're keeping the house at 60 degrees, you've got to have a perfect building enclosure to prevent problems, because that very, very humid air getting anywhere in there can cause problems. And I've seen cases where people had to rip open walls of year-old houses in situations like this, because number one, there wasn't much leakage, but there was enough to get in there. Number two, they're running the air temperature inside really low and keeping those surfaces cold, below the dew point of the outdoor air. And number three, they're not doing anything to ventilate the house or keep a little bit of positive pressure in the house, which could mitigate some of the infiltration of humid air that causes those problems.
So these people, I'm having a hard time picturing this. I'm in the north. If you've got the relative humidity under control, you should be able to let the temperature go up without people really noticing. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah. Everybody has slightly different comfort levels. Some people have significantly different comfort levels, and our metabolisms vary. And men generally run a higher metabolism than women. Large people run a higher metabolism than skinny people. So there is variation, and some people. I've seen people sweating when the temperature is 70 degrees and they're just sitting around.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not 70. I don't know.
It seems to me that that lowering the thermostat too much was one of the top 10 stupid things that Northerners do in the South, but I could be wrong. That was one of Joe Stiefel's old articles. Yeah. Hey, let's go to the roundup. The Roundup is brought to you by April Air, providing healthy humidity, ventilation, and air purity solutions for new and existing homes. April Air, healthy air, healthy home at aprilaire.com. All right, I want to go real quick before we go to the Restoration Industries Global Watchdog Peak and Signal. I got a question. What if you could give us your kind of cliff notes on the future of homes? What are we going to see as time goes on here, Allison, that maybe we're not thinking of right now?
That we're not thinking of? Oh, I'm thinking of it. Aren't you thinking of it?
Maybe I am, but I think a lot of people aren't.
Well, my goal is to see homes get better and better, and get building science implemented into the construction of buildings. Start back up into the design and the construction of buildings, and later on the improvement, the maintenance of buildings, and also how people operate buildings. I mean, there's some basic things people don't understand and are given bad advice sometimes. Like there are HVAC technicians out there who will advise people to, if they've got a heat pump, to set it to emergency heat if the outdoor temperature goes below 40 degrees. That's crazy. That means you're going to jack up your energy bill tremendously because you're using only strip heat, and you've completely turned off the compressor, and you're not using the much more efficient heat that still operates below 40 degrees. Anyway, so the future of homes, people are getting more educated, and I hope my book helps with that. Some people are, and we have better materials now than we used to have. We have more air sealing materials and water control layer materials. We have lots and lots of free information online. My blog, buildingscience.com, of course, is go-to for all the stuff. Hammer in Hand, a builder in the Pacific Northwest, has a great best practices manual that they put out, which I talked about that and showed some of their diagrams in the book. There's lots of good information out there. Homes, I think, are going to improve. We have the monitoring side of it now getting better and better. I have 2 Aware Element indoor air quality monitors in my house, and they're not a sponsor or anything. So I can look at temperature, relative humidity, carbon dioxide level, particulate matter 2.5 microns, PM 2.5, and chemicals. The chemicals thing is very interesting. I open a bottle of whiskey and it shoots up to 5,000. So the chemicals, just because it spikes isn't always a bad thing, right?
Right.
So,
I hear you.
Yeah.
Now, do you think maybe we're getting? I worry we're overcomplicating things in some ways. That the more we add controls and the more we monitor, that sometimes we may be overcomplicating it. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, for people like us, the monitoring is important because it helps us understand how houses work better, and so we can provide better advice. Expecting everybody to do the same level of monitoring that I do and that you do and the other people listening to the show right now probably do. That's a little too much, but those of us who are doing that and working in the field can use that information to help improve the design of homes and the things that go into homes and the building of homes. And so
I think the overcomplication is a possibility, but I guess we'll see. That goes without. Well, let me do this. Cliff, first, do you have any thoughts, questions, final thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I do. And 10 years ago, one of the things that we discussed was the need when we tightened these homes to have dehumidification. A need for that in the home. I just wondered whether your opinion on that has increased, decreased, or remained the same.
Yeah, no, that's still true. As we improve homes, improve the building enclosure, make them more airtight and more better insulated, we're reducing both the sensible and the latent loads. But the indoors now, there's even the high efficiency variable capacity mini split equipment sometimes won't handle the latent loads, the dehumidification. Here's something that a lot of people think. Well, yeah, I would say a lot of people think this with mini splits, because of the variable capacity, you can't oversize them. Well, that's absolutely not true. You can oversize them. And there are probably a lot of mini splits in a lot of houses right now that are bottomed out. They are always running at their absolute lowest capacity, or almost always running at their lowest capacity, because they're oversized. So the people who installed those are getting no benefit from the ability to modulate the capacity of those units. So mini splits and all variable capacity systems have to be sized properly, and you have to pay attention to what that bottom end is. And you want to be able to modulate above that bottom end so you can go down as low as possible. So.
Thanks. Are you seeing any innovations in the HVAC industry, the manufacturing, where they are doing more about dehumidification?
Well, Thermistor, a great company, makes dehumidifiers, and they have been a sponsor of ours in the past. They just introduced a thermostat that monitors dew point, and I think it controls systems based on dew point, which is an amazing new thing. And I just saw this week, and I haven't really checked it out. So take a look at that. I think that's something that a lot of people in the dehumidification world, Lou Harriman, for example, Lou has been asking for that for a while. And so I think maybe now we're getting some controls that will look at dew point.
At least Thermistor is looking at that. I love my Thermistor unit here. It's just, It's been fantastic to be able to keep I don't even need the air conditioning anymore. If I properly dehumidify with the Thermistor unit we have there, it's a whole house dehumidifier. We also can ventilate. It's just spectacular. We use the air conditioning maybe 1 or 2 weeks a year. But hey, let's go to the restoration industry's global watchdog, Peak and Sigma.
So I enjoyed listening to Allison. Hey, Allison, should we start to talk about food now? I mean, the last time we got together, boy, we had quite a feed there in Atlanta, huh?
We did. That was great.
Yeah, and you posted that, and boy, there was a lot of activity on the social media on that. Now, listen, I enjoyed this show. I think the point that Cliff brought up that you talked about the dehumidification, I think you're going to start to see more and more in that. A lot of that had been developed for crawl spaces and things of that nature over the years, but now I think, particularly in these hot, humid climates, it seems that the air conditioners that are in there sometimes just can't handle the high peak seasons. It can't handle the loads, and that probably creates problems. So maybe you're going to start to see more of that out there. Joe, well, Allison, I'm not sure. Did you make a decision, Allison, whether you're going to come down to the Andy S symposium for the winter break in Naples in January?
I'm going to see if I can get there. I haven't made a decision yet.
All right. Well, I hope you're gonna make it. I know Rick Sims. They got a bunch of your books, and I've already been promoting them. There's a couple local guys who live down in the area who want to get them, and I think they don't sell them out by then. They're certainly going to make them available to sell them at the show. So it'd be great if you come down. A lot of your buddies are going to be there. I've been working on putting I'm actually going to have private dinner parties all week. And I got one in particular early on, though I was listening to the first part of the show, is finalizing the menu selection. And I had to make special arrangements for the Z-Man and Cliff, of course, our buddy from across the pond also. So I always like to take care of all my friends. And Joe, one of these days, you're going to have to be able to get on the plane and come down here. We miss you, not seeing you these last few years at these winter breaks down here in Florida. All your friends are down here. So, but Allison, it'd be great to have you come down. The pioneers are going to be talking about all kinds of stuff, I know, which will be a high interest to you. And we're going to have this show on December 2nd, Joe, with Rick Sims. He's going to kind of give a little report of what's been going on down here with the hurricane in Southwest Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is so busy down here. There's they all have all kinds of issues trying to get supply parts for all the HVAC systems and, just general construction. But I think a lot of the industry people have really been doing a yeoman's job down there and, get the work done and bring the area back. It was really sad. It was some of the areas got hit really, really hard. They say it's going to affect the snowbirds this year, that we're probably going to have less people come in the peak season, only because there's not going to be any places for them to stay. A lot of these condos got hit, and it's going to take probably to the following year before many of them are built and back up. And there are a lot of code provisions, which I think are going to be taken into account now. I think that's pretty important. This happened obviously after Hurricane Andrew in 92, but after Hurricane Charlie in 2004, a lot of code changes. And I think there's going to be lessons learned from Ian also. And we're trying to put together, I'm pretty sure we're going to be announcing this fairly soon, a post-conference event around the winter break on the Thursday after the main conference, which will be a multidisciplinary panel on the lessons learned from the response and recovery to the hurricane. with a lot of people in Florida who are working on the ground. And I think that'll be very high interest. I'm hoping that the Z-Man can stay over and help moderate that. And then we'll roll into the highlight show that we're going to be doing on the 27th, I think it is, of February, to report on that. And we'll get some really good feedback on that too, from a lot of IEQA people that'll be here, and IICRC, REA, all the different associations will be fairly represented, and a lot of people from the HVAC industry, architects, home builders. So anyway, it's really exciting. And I appreciate the support that IEQ Radio really gives consistently with all of these programs that we put on.
Well, we appreciate you supporting us too, Pete. Allison, he brought up something that I've been hearing more of. I'm not seeing it in my own area, but we had Nate Adams on recently, and others have mentioned it's been a little tough to get HVAC equipment in. That it seems like it's a little tight right now. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think things have gotten better in the last year than they were a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. But yeah, there's still supply chain issues, and of course now we've got inflation ramping prices up.
Yeah.
So
it's a tough time to be a builder.
Switch each other out with the inflation going up. People won't be buying as much, and so we'll build up more of a stockpile, and it'll be easier to.
Well, that really down here, a lot of the people who live in Florida, particularly the condos, they have contracts for general maintenance with a lot of the air handling companies. And these guys are just buried, with all the storm related stuff over and above just the normal maintenance that they would do. But I know at the winter break conference, the Andes Symposium, I mean, the main sponsors there are going to be Mitsubishi, IEQ Madison with Thermistor, Santa Fe, Train, all those folks. I'm talking your language here now, Allison. All those guys, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
they're kind of the headliners, and then all the other usual suspects, and who are involved in moisture and water and the Sun Belt and Tramix people, and there's quite a few other ones. Are going to be down here too, so there's going to be a good, be a lot of availability, and they'll be able to tell us by January what's going on. Is there still a shortage? Are they getting parts out or not? Because they're a lot of the main suppliers to the builders and architects in the industry in general. So anyway, I hope to see you down there, Allison. And I did enjoy the show. I don't get to call in that often unless I involve setting a show up, but I did call in today to listen to you.
All right.
Thank you, Pete. Hey, by the way, Allison, I just want to throw out kudos to you for the Energy Vanguard blog. If any of our audience doesn't get that, you really need to get it. His writing is just so clear and concise, and you're able to get complex topics kind of boiled down into easy to understand language. And I followed that Energy Vanguard blog since you put it out, and I'll continue to. And I want people to do the same. Before we go, is there anything we missed that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it all. That's the whole book. So nobody needs to buy the book now.
No, we'll buy it.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah, buddy.
Somebody just asked in the chat box, where is there information on the Florida conference you're talking about? I'll send the link to Cliff and make sure Cliff puts it in the blog. So the gentleman who asked that question, when the blog comes out next Wednesday or Thursday, they'll have a link in there, and you can go to the site, register for the event. We have a room, the special room reservation. There'll be a link for that. All the details, the speaker, the sessions, everything will be there on the website. It's a Comfort Zone 1. I know Climate Zone 1 .com is actually the website. You probably go to it and find it, but we'll put the link in there. And anyway, look forward to seeing everybody who's going to be attending on the call.
I can't think of a finer gentleman to help, as he's slowly retiring, slowly but surely, the NDOS Building Symposium. Great guy, and looking forward to, hopefully, maybe I'll make it. We'll see, Pete. My back's getting a little better. Allison Bales, thank you so much for joining us today. Cliff, any final thoughts or questions for you?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, Joe.
All right. What I want to do here is just say thanks again to our guest, this week's guest, Dr. Allison Bales, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick, John, you got to have faith at the controls, our sponsors, our loyal audience. And next week, we've got Lisa White on IAQ and Passive House. She was one of the speakers at Joe's summer camp. I heard great things about her, and I look forward to talking to her next week on the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.